Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling one of the most radical economic ideas to hit the mainstream in a long time:
A really disruptive one.
the complete elimination of the federal income tax. We've gone through a stack of sources, from deep economic analyses to political commentary, to really understand what happens next.
Right. What happens when you try to replace the single biggest pillar of the U.S. financial system, with just one thing: tariffs? So taxes on imported goods.
And this isn't just about tweaking tax brackets, is it?
No, not at all. This is a proposal for a complete structural rewrite of the U.S. financial code. The idea, which has been suggested by Donald Trump, is to fund the entire federal government, and we're talking trillions of dollars here, just through these border taxes.
So our mission for this deep dive, your mission, is to get past the slogans. We're going to dig into the actual math.
The cold, hard numbers.
Yeah, why critics are saying the numbers just don't add up, and what it would mean for you, for your wallet, for prices at the store, and really for the stability of the entire economy.
It's a real study in extremes. You have this utopian promise of no more IRS.
Which sounds great.
It sounds amazing. But on the other side, you have these enormous systemic risks that could redefine global trade as we know it.
Okay, so let's unpack this, and let's start with the promise, because that's the part that really gets everyone's attention.
It's a compelling vision.
It really is. The
Yeah.
core idea you see in the materials is, the end of the IRS. No more tax withholding stress. Proponents are even calling it the largest tax refund in American history.
And they're even talking about dividend checks. We saw some analysts speculating that every American could get, maybe $2,000 a year?
Yeah.
Just from this new tariff revenue.
That's a huge hook.
It is, and it's rooted in this very deep shift in economic philosophy. I mean, you're changing how the government raises money entirely.
So moving from taxing work to taxing consumption.
Exactly. And supporters like the economist Brian Brenberg, they celebrate this because it stops penalizing work. The idea is so simple.
Yeah.
You work more, you keep it all.
That's a powerful sentiment, that just the idea of rewarding productivity.
It is.
And we saw these specific examples being tossed around, like, imagine no tax on your tips, no tax on overtime, no tax coming out of your Social Security check. It's an immediate, tangible reward.
There's that one story, I think it was from Taylor Riggs, about a worker who is already planning out what they do with all their untaxed overtime.
Right, and that emotional appeal, that very understandable desire to be rewarded for your labor, that's what makes this so magnetic.
What's also fascinating is that this isn't, a totally new idea out of nowhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you look back, this model is basically a return to America's Gilded Age. Before the modern income tax came in around 1913, tariffs were the main source of government funding. Sometimes the only source.
So wait, if it worked back in the 19th century, why is everyone saying it's impossible now? Didn't the U.S. run on tariffs just fine back then?
But that's the key. The government that tariffs funded in, say, 1890 it was almost unrecognizably small compared to today.
Okay.
I mean, it handled basic infrastructure, defense, and not much else. There was no giant standing military, no Social Security, no Medicare, no huge federal debt to service. The entire budget was a tiny fraction of what we expect the government to do now.
And that, I think, is where the sunny vision just slams head-on into modern finance. Let's talk about the math.
This is the absolute core of the conflict, and we have to slow down here because the scale of this gap, it's just staggering. We're talking about replacing trillions of dollars.
Okay, so to put it in context, total federal receipts last year were around $5 trillion. The part that this plan has to replace, the individual income tax, our sources put that somewhere between 2.4 and 2.7 trillion a year?
Right, so let's just use a round number. Call it $2.5 trillion. That is the target. Tariffs have to hit that number every single year.
And what do tariffs bring in right now?
Well, today's tariffs, which are already pretty significant, they bring in somewhere between $195 billion and maybe $300 billion.
So even if we're generous and say it's $250 billion?
You need $2.5 trillion. You have $250 billion.
So when you see that massive gap, what's the immediate implication for how high the tariffs would have to go?
The implication is what analysts like Erica York at the Tax Foundation called mechanically impossible. To close that $2.25 trillion shortfall, you would have to increase current tariff revenue by tenfold or more.
Tenfold.
Imagine you need to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's the $2.5 trillion. But your only tool is a single garden hose, and that hose is dripping out the $250 billion we have now. The hose isn't just insufficient, it's It's practically irrelevant to the task.
Okay, so let's translate that into percentages.
Yeah.
If the U.S. imports about $3 trillion worth of goods, to make the math work, you'd need an average tariff rate on everything.
Everything from oil and car parts to kids' toys.
Of what, 70%?
90%.
And that assumes people don't just stop buying imported goods because they're suddenly so expensive.
And that's the critical point. It's a catch-22. If the math doesn't add up and you get rid of the income tax anyway, the choice becomes very stark. Either tariffs become so high they cause total economic chaos, or the government deficit balloons and you risk collapse.
This is where it gets really interesting, because if you do implement those high tariffs, you walk straight into economic peril, because they act as a massive hidden consumption tax.
Yes, and the key word there is hidden. It hits consumers instantly, but it's how it hits that matters.
Right, an income tax is visible. You see it taken out of your paycheck.
But a tariff is invisible.
Yeah.
The price of that imported shirt on the shelf is just higher. You don't see the tax, you just feel the cost shock.
And we saw some really clear examples. That $20 imported shirt you buy with the 70 to 90% tariff, suddenly it's a $30 or $40 shirt.
And it's not just shirts. It's gas refined overseas, it's electronics, it's produce. Everything with an imported component gets that price shock.
Which leads right to inflation.
A massive inflationary spiral. Analysts were warning this could trigger inflation of 5%, maybe even 10%. That's like acid on savings and fixed incomes.
And with the U.S. economy being, what, 60 or 70% consumer-driven?
You're pouring sand in the engine. When you make everything consumers buy that much more expensive, you risk choking off the entire economy.
But I think the deepest concern critics raised was this idea of an inequality bomb.
Because a consumption tax, hidden or not, is inherently regressive.
Meaning it hurts lower-income people the most.
Exactly. Lower-income families spend a much larger share of their money on necessities, food, gas, clothes, basic electronics, so they carry the heaviest burden. The wealthy might be able to invest abroad or just buy high-end domestic goods.
But for people on fixed incomes, minimum wage workers, they're just forced to pay much higher prices for the basics. So a system designed to reward work could end up pushing millions into financial distress.
And we haven't even talked about the global reaction.
So trade wars.
Absolutely. Putting a near 90% tariff on goods isn't something countries just accept. Our rivals, like China and the European Union, they would retaliate instantly.
With tariffs on American exports.
Which would cripple our supply chains, damage domestic industries like agriculture and tech, and you could see mass job evaporation. The whole benefit of keeping more of your income kind of disappears if the economy collapses and you lose your job.
So, okay, let's look at the worst-case fiscal scenario. Let's say the math fails. The revenue falls short of that $2.5 trillion.
Then the deficit could balloon. We saw figures suggesting it could grow by up to $3 trillion a year.
A $3 trillion annual deficit. What does that do to government services?
It creates immediate, severe risks to the safety net. I mean, Social Security, which already has fund issues, could go bankrupt even faster. The military would face huge budget cuts. Healthcare systems could crumble. When the government is starved for cash, that social contract just rips apart.
Now, to be fair, we have to talk about the counter-argument from the plan supporters.
A pro-growth case.
Right. Proponents like Thomas Hayes and Kevin Hassett, they argue that getting rid of the income tax would unleash this incredible flood of capital and manufacturing back into the U.S.
The idea is that the economy would just grow its way out of the revenue gap.
They're predicting a gangbusters year, maybe in 2026, something like the boom after World War II.
Basically, they believe the inflation and trade shock would be temporary and a massive boom in domestic production would follow, which would make imports, and therefore tariffs, less necessary over time.
But even that hopeful view runs into some long-term structural problems, right?
It does. There was one point that circulated in the sources about the future of work itself.
With AI and robots.
Exactly. As AI and automation potentially displace more human workers, the income tax base, which is built on taxing human labor, is going to shrink anyway.
So that argument is that we might be forced to switch to a consumption or tariff-based system eventually, whether we like it or not.
It reframes the whole debate. It's not, can we do this today, but maybe, will we have to do this in the future?
And even if you solve all that, there's a huge legal question mark hanging over this whole thing.
A big one. Thomas Hayes warned that these massive tariffs would almost certainly face court challenges. If the Supreme Court strikes down the revenue mechanism, the entire government funding plan could just unravel overnight, with no backup.
And that's where the danger becomes really acute.
It is.
Hmm.
If the growth doesn't happen, the debt spirals. If the legal challenge succeeds, the revenue vanishes. It's a moment of maximum vulnerability for the country.
So when you process all of this, what does it really mean? It feels like a choice between two completely different futures, both with enormous stakes, and it's all based on this massive gamble.
It is. The central tension is right there. You have this incredibly appealing emotional idea of rewarding work and getting rid of the IRS.
Which again sounds fantastic.
But it's up against the cold reality of a multi-trillion-dollar revenue gap and the risk of crippling inflation, inequality, and a hidden consumption tax that follows. It's a beautiful idea, but the economics seem to require a miracle.
You have to demand math that supports the magic.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. Back when America ran on tariffs, it was funding a tiny, decentralized government.
A completely different world.
Completely. So given the massive scale of today's $5 trillion federal budget, which funds Social Security, a global military, healthcare, what is the basic responsibility a modern government has to secure revenue that is predictable and stable? And how does that responsibility change the moment you even consider abandoning the entire income tax structure, knowing you're gambling with the safety net for millions of people?
Heed the storm. We hope this deep dive gave you the knowledge you need to navigate this discussion. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.